What's up, YouTube? Hope you're ready for another week of fantasy football today, and we're going to get started right now. We need you to hit like and hit subscribe. Many reasons you should do this. If you hit subscribe, you can chat with us. You can't do that unless you're a subscriber. Also, you'll be notified when we have new shows, like we have our live streams that are YouTube only, so you want to be a subscriber so you know when those are coming. Anyway, we're getting started right now. Here we go. What can we learn from last year? For me, maybe don't go RB, wide receiver, bad wide receiver at that, RB in a 3-receiver PPR league. And if we look at the winner from last year, we should definitely draft Devontae Adams, Cooper Kupp, and Deebo Samuel. That was a winning strategy in our Fantasy Football Today league.
Don't mention his name, though. Do not mention his name.
Well, I did mention it, but you talked over it, so maybe people didn't hear.
Don't. We not give that man credit.
I'm with Jamie. He never deserves credit.
Until
he shows up on time for one thing.
Yeah. We'll call him Bill Winson.
Well, technically, his name is Bill.
Bill Winson. Yeah, it is, I guess. All right. Anyway,
congrats, Will, you're the greatest ever.
He had an incredible team and an incredible year with terrible picks in rounds 5 and 6, which is another thing you learn right off the bat. You go look at some draft results from last year. A lot of bad picks. It's okay. It's not over on draft day. It's not even close to over on draft day. I'm Adam Azzi. You heard Jamie Eisenberg. The other guy you heard, Dan Schneier. What's up, Dan?
Happy to be back here, Adam.
Happy to have you. Dan's filling in today, and he actually wasn't cool enough to be invited to the Fantasy Football Today League last year. He's hoping for an invite this year, JB.
I'm still bitter about that, by the way.
Dan, when you looked, I sent you the draft results. When you looked at it, give me a lesson learned from last year that we might be able to apply to 2022.
A lot of things stand out, but the first one I want to touch on, because it's been such a big topic and big talking point already in drafts this preseason, is you hear a lot of, wow, I kind of like the running back dead zone this year, right? Like I'm hearing a lot of people like, I really like what I'm getting at running back in rounds 3 through 5. But I'm here to tell you the dead zone is alive and well. Don't fall into that trap. They're going to look good now, but they're not going to look good on your roster 2 months into the season. And we look at this draft, and this was a hell of an ugly dead zone. I mean, we've got Miles Sanders, Myles Gaskin, Gus Edwards. That's an injury situation, but even so there, I mean, you're looking at a lot of these.
I think, Dan, before you go there, what round are you talking about where it starts? Round 4?
I'm starting round 3 even here. Okay. I think, or no, I'm sorry. I'm starting round 4 in this one. Correct. So I should have said rounds 4 through 6, because in round 3, it was a little, well, actually in round 3 is when you got James Robinson, which again, I don't want to totally call a bust just because there was an injury situation there. But even so, it's like, great. Yeah, he was great when healthy, but obviously that's, you know, so we can call that no bust. He scored a lot of points, but in Clyde Edwards-Helaire, that's a trap that a lot of us fell into. But if you look starting in rounds 4 and then going through 4 through 6, that's when it starts to get really dicey at the position. I mean, even you mentioned Will, the winner of this league, Adam. Well, 2 of his worst picks in this draft were in that running back dead zone in rounds 5 and 6.
Right. He took Mike Davis trap. But you're talking about all these running backs, and you started with Miles Sanders and Myles Gaskin. You did leave out the one who went right before them.
I did leave out DeAndre Swift, because there's always going to be one hit in the running back dead zone. You're going to get a hit.
There are more than one.
No, but then round 5, I mean, Josh Jacobs and Damian Harris were fine.
Josh Jacobs was a volume. All right, I guess you're right. They're fine is another. Okay, so what you're giving up though when you're taking a player like that, you're giving up T. Higgins, who goes a few picks later, right? You're giving up the upside of an actual impact wide receiver there.
It's a tough conversation to have, because you're not wrong. Like, in a vacuum, you know, like, here are the wide receivers. You know, you got Cooper Kupp, Julio Jones, Mike Evans, Tyler Lockett, Deontay Johnson. There were some. Right. Shan, you're gonna have to. You don't have headphones, huh? Because I can hear me on your speakers. Oh. Okay. If you could maybe lower.
That will be fixed for the next one.
Okay, thank you. You do have, you know, and you have like Lamar. I don't know. You do have a lot of wide receiver busts here too. I kind of think, Jamie, you might be with me. I kind of resent this idea that the running back dead zone is so bad, because it sort of ignores that there are players picked at other positions that were bad as well. And I think we're a little hard on the running backs in the running back dead zone sometimes. But there are some success stories here.
I think we should. Well, first we need to put this in context. It's a 3-receiver PPR league. I think you might have said that already. But we did this draft right before the start of the season. This is usually the last draft that we do. You know, there's going to be some names that we mentioned that, you know, some unfortunate injuries. One in particular, you know, in this range is Gus Edwards. You know, you drafted him, Adam, right before he got hurt. So, some certain things, happen, but I think this isn't a really strong argument against the dead zone.
Yeah, I don't think it. I think it's about identifying which guys are going to be. Is there a lesson to learn of don't take Myles Gaskin, Mike Davis? I mean, is there something
when you're chasing the pure volume guys like Gaskin and Davis, like these guys?
It's also chasing the one hit wonders that you can see the pitfalls,
right?
So it's kind of those situations.
Well, there's a few hits in here. Would you say, Jamie, that there's more? Wouldn't you say there's more hits at the wide receiver position? I mean, you're getting big time hits like Higgins, Deontay Johnson, Kupp.
You mentioned one, in terms of Josh Jacobs versus T. Higgins. Jacobs was a better fantasy player than T. Higgins was last year. Now, there may have been more highs for T. Higgins. I don't know in terms of, how the season broke down, but just in terms of total points and even points per game, it was close. But in total points, Jacobs was better. So, for what you're getting at that position versus what you're getting at Higgins, and again, you could play it out, what the Josh Jacobs manager did with his receiving core and the T. Higgins manager did with their running back core. That I think how you balance your team. But in any event, getting Josh Jacobs in round 5 in this league, I think was pretty good.
Here's another question to spin on this RB dead zone here. I understand that if I'm looking at round 5-ish, I'd rather have a wide receiver there than a running back in a vacuum. But if I already have 3 with my first 4 picks, what do I do? Do I go quarterback? I mean, do I just ignore a running back?
I don't see why you can't keep going wide receiver. You're still trying to win the flex. Until you fill out all the starting positions, and even after that, I'm still skeptical. But I never believe that you have to kind of fill this thing granular. Like, you got to get your running backs, you got to get your receivers, you got to get your quarterbacks. You're trying to score the most points here, and you're trying to get the best chance of breakouts. Because, even if you look at it, I agree with you, Jamie. You're right. In a vacuum, Jacobs and Higgins were comparative, even on a points per game basis where Higgins did beat him out. But then you look at the round before that, that's where you really have the chance at the league winning picks, like the Cooper Kupps and the Deontay Johnsons. I'm just not seeing that at the running back position there, even with a guy like DeAndre Swift, who had a great year. And you're not really seeing, when's the last time we've had a league winning running back pick in that range?
I can probably tell you that.
Yeah, you probably.
Well,
you probably
know go down a little further when Fournette went.
Yeah, right. I mean, eventually when you get to, that's the other lesson to go when you go down to the Fournettes and the James Connors, which is invest in good offenses at the end of the draft, second running backs and good offenses. Both those guys hit in similar profile. They were counted out in their offense. Chase Edmonds was expected to be the starter there, obviously. And then obviously Ronald Jones, there was still some hype around there, but I feel like that's when you get deeper into the draft. And when you're talking about these players like Swift and these players who are going Sanders, Gaskin, these players going in round 3 and 4 at running back, I'm not seeing the league winning potential that I see with a guy like Kupp or Deontay Johnson or some of these other players going off at that position.
Okay. Jamie, any lesson that you want to talk about from last year's FFT draft?
I mean, in general, I think, Dan hit on a good one in terms of, getting good players from good offenses if you're going to take some swings at that position. I know for me, and this is probably just a very small sample size because I do so many leagues, but this was our last draft and I was taking players that I just really didn't have a lot of exposure to. And that was a huge mistake on my part. Like Dan mentioned, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I don't think I had drafted Clyde Edwards-Helaire at that point. So I was like, I'm going to reach for him a little bit. I reached for Kyle Pitts at that point, which was in round 4. I was just taking players that I didn't have a lot of other leagues with. So don't do that because it was not a very good draft. I was able to manage my way into the playoffs, but it was just a very, very ugly team. So, I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about our teams. But yeah, it was that was the biggest lesson I learned looking back on this.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing to do. I don't know if you care about, I don't want to have too much exposure to any particular players or anything like that. I think that's maybe what you were getting at there. But all right, it didn't work out. And you did get the 4 seed, I believe. So even though you didn't have a great start to your drafts, you still were able to cobble together a good team. All right, we got to talk about some news and notes here, and we'll get back to the draft in a little bit. Want to remind everybody we have live streams on YouTube. Tuesday afternoon live streams are going to be typically at 1 p.m. Eastern. The best way to learn about these is to subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/fantasyfootballtoday. youtube.com/fantasyfootball today. And please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcast as well with your fantasy question after a nice little comment. We'd appreciate that. Injuries, news, and notes. Deshaun Watson's attorney, Rusty Hardin, said there's a good possibility that the NFL will make a decision that Watson will not like. So I don't think that would be a huge surprise, Dan, but what are you bracing for with Deshaun Watson, and how would that affect the rest of the Browns?
Yeah, it's hard to really put a prediction on this type of news, but I think we could be looking at an 8-game suspension. It just seems to be what I've been reading about. And if he is out for 8 games, it's going to change the way that Browns offense looks. First of all, we don't expect Baker Mayfield to start here, so maybe we'll get something like Jacoby Brissett. But honestly, if he's not starting, I'm going to downgrade the entire offense. You could still expect that Kevin Stefanski run game with that offensive line to produce for players like Chubb and Hunt, but overall, you got to downgrade everyone there, especially Amari Cooper.
Hopefully we can find out pretty soon what's going on. Colts head coach Frank Reich said they are definitely pushing rookie wide receiver Alec Pierce to compete to start. Jamie, do you think Alec Pierce should be drafted in a, let's say, 15-round draft, 12 teams?
If you have, he's in the conversation. I think if you start to look at, dart throws, because this receiving core clearly is Michael Pittman and then a bunch of question marks. So if you are looking to get just somebody who has a chance to probably be in the 100 target range, we'll see if they bring back T.Y. Hilton. There's still some conversation about that, but when you're talking about Paris Campbell and Alec Pierce and the guys that they have on the roster right now, it's just Pierce has the best shot, I think, to A, stay healthy and B, be productive. I was fond of him coming into the NFL draft process. So he's somebody that I will definitely be taking a flyer on if I need another wide receiver, 5th wide receiver type of player. But he also could be somebody that you want to, if he goes undrafted, keep an eye on for early in the season waiver wire ads.
James Robinson has resumed running as he's recovering from the Achilles injury. Jamie, if Robinson is ready for week 1, not saying he will be, if he's ready for week 1, which Jaguars running back do you draft first?
Still Etienne. You got to take a cautious approach with Robinson. We got so lucky to whatever extent you got out of Cam Akers, for anybody playing in playoff leagues or, for, postseason fantasy football, DFS, et cetera. So I don't think you can expect Robinson to be back and getting that type of work because, look, Travis Etienne's a first-round talent. They didn't have the luxury of having somebody that they trusted to that same extent. I think, Sony Michel, who knows where they were at in terms of the Rams. I'm sure the Jaguars want to be cautious with James Robinson to make sure it's 100%. Different time of season, different part of the season.
Yeah. Okay, we got Jarvis Landry, according to New Orleans Football. I didn't know you could do that. Can I make my email? Can I make like an Adam Azer.football email address? Does that work? I don't know.
Sure.
Jarvis Landry is dominating at OTAs. What do you make of that?
I mean, whenever we get reports like this, you got to look at the scenario. And so you have no Michael Thomas, so he's not there. And then you have a rookie in Chris Olave, who, by all accounts, is having a good offseason as well, with OTAs. But Jarvis Landry's a veteran. He's going to – you show him a playbook, it's not going to take him long to know what he's doing. Whereas a rookie coming in is going to be like, learning a different language. So – I'd be surprised if Jarvis Landry was lost. I'd be surprised if the reports weren't positive. He's a guy that's been in several systems at this point and, should be able to handle things. I apologize if you hear the coughing in the background. My son is a little sick. So
yeah, I apologize if you hear Bluey in the background. My son is a little addicted to Bluey.
Headphones.
The headphones are broken. You guys watch Bluey? You watch Bluey?
No.
It's really good. It's really
he is my 4-year-old right now is playing NBA 2K on his cell phone. What are you playing?
Yeah.
Or a baseball game. He's addicted to baseball games. And he has cars on his iPad. So he is double technology. Great parenting over here.
Love it, man. All right. I love the screen time. Justin Jefferson said Minnesota's offense is moving to a new generation, basically, is what he said. And that's what you've been excited about with Kirk Cousins. So we know things are going to look a little bit different there. The Bucs are optimistic that Rob Gronkowski will re-sign before training camp. And Zach Wilson is reportedly struggling with accuracy in camp. So does that matter to you? Because Zach Wilson's a pretty important player for other players. We need him to be good. Maybe he could be a good fantasy option. Can't rule it out. But obviously, there are a lot of interesting guys on the Jets. So,
yeah, I mean, it's going to be frustrating if you invest in Garrett Wilson and Elijah Moore and obviously Breece Hall or Michael Carter, whatever, and Corey Davis. There's, like you said, there's a lot of names there. So hopefully he gets everything straightened out. I'm cautiously optimistic because I do think that he'll be better in his second year, but accuracy issues in the offseason are not good.
Great question here from Patrick. Will Jamie's kids be in the podcast league?
I mean, if they're not, I'll make room for them.
We're out of spots already. Schneier's back. Hey, Dan. Can you hear me, Dan? Oh, you got to be kidding me.
Terrible about this.
If it's not Dave, then it's Dan. Dan, can you hear me?
If your name starts with a D, you have
me.
Yeah, I can hear you, but that's not working great here. Dan, you wanted to say something about Justin Jefferson, I believe.
So I have a little bit of a contrarian take that I want to get both of your thoughts on. So we hear about this Jefferson. All of the talk about the Vikings offense is things are going to be great. We're moving to a new direction. We're taking our offense to the next level. But I'm a little concerned with this offense in general, specifically with the run game with Dalvin Cook, because they found so much success with Kubiak last year in a zone-based run blocking system that we know has had success with a lot of different offenses over the years through his dad, Gary Kubiak, who had a lot of success with the Texans. And then it's really a Shanahan-based run game in the zone blocking game. Now we move forward with this, Sean McVay disciple. And we saw something similar happen last year with Shane Waldron in Seattle, where we thought that offense was going to go to the next level and be taken to the next level. And I'm almost concerned with how this will impact both Cook and Justin Jefferson, because the Kubiak offense, while I agree with him, what he's saying, it was very old school. It was based, old school principles, very old school cadence, things of that nature. But it did run through the X and the Z, the two number 1 and number 2 receivers on the outside, and then the running back in the zone run game. And I'm not so sure this is definitely going to be an upgrade, that they're going to throw a lot of new things at him. We've already seen some of these Sean McVay disciples not have as much success as the others. And so I'm almost a little bit more concerned with how this offense is going to impact Dalvin Cook, because both Cooks, James Cook and Dalvin Cook, are perfect fits for the zone blocking run scheme. And I know they're going to do a lot of that with O'Connell now in this offense, but it's not going to be the exact same offense. And so I'm not so sure that this offense from a schematic standpoint is not going to take some time to kind of hit the ground running. And I'm not so sure it's going to run through the same players it ran through last year at such a high volume.
Well, I do think it's going to run through the same players, because they, I think the one thing that's a huge plus is that O'Connell and Cousins have a track record together. They're with each other in Washington. So, the terminology, may be a little similar, which should help Cousins, which I think, if the quarterback has everything under his fingertips, that's going to help everybody else. I think the biggest thing, though, is it's not necessarily comparing O'Connell to Kubiak. It's more comparing O'Connell to Zimmer, and the philosophy of, I'm going to be conservative. If there's an obvious run situation, we're running. If there's maybe an obvious passing situation, we're still running, because he's just so afraid of his own shadow. It felt like a little bit in terms of letting Kirk Cousins make plays. Insert Cousins joke here. So, we'll find out. I do think there'll just be a little bit more of a welcome to 2022 for the Vikings, where, I don't know what their run pass ratio has been.
Right. I want to point this out. They've had the last 4 years with Cousins and Zimmer. And that's off the top of my head. They've had 2 years where they've been almost at the bottom of pass attempts, around 30th. Maybe 1 year where they were dead last. 1 year, I believe they were 4th or something like that in pass attempts. They had a lot high. That was 3 years ago, maybe. And last year, I think they were 11th. So I don't know that they're actually going to throw more. But Dave pointed out why he likes Adam Thielen, because he can really rely on the touchdowns with Thielen more than most players, because there's such a track record of Cousins throwing the ball to Thielen in the end zone or inside the 10-yard line. And another thing he pointed out was when they got inside the 10-yard line, they ran so much. I mean, so it's not necessarily, and it's kind of what Jamie's alluding to, it's not necessarily about the raw numbers. It's about the philosophy. And they ran the ball so much near the end zone. So Dave is making a case for Thielen that they could start throwing the ball more near the end zone. And then you could get even more green zone, end zone targets for Thielen. So it might be that, maybe you won't see more pass attempts, but kind of like with Russell Wilson, let him throw on first down more. When they did for 8 games, decide to let him cook or whatever. So it could just be philosophy and not necessarily throw more than they did last year.
I think it's also, just to tie in Thielen a little bit, Thielen definitely has a big opportunity. First, he's got to stay healthy. That's the biggest thing, because when he's healthy, he's great. But I think we're going to see a little bit more 3 receiver sets. I think they'll line up, a lot more trust in KJ Osborne because of what he showed last year. I also think, the presence of Irv Smith is going to probably hurt Adam Thielen and his touchdown potential, because that's such a strong player in the red zone, such a strong player that they can use that they didn't have last year.
And I think all that makes sense, but I think none of that quells my concern for Dalvin Cook. I guess that's where I'll focus this now. I'll take it a little bit off less what's going to happen with Jefferson in that passing game, but more with Dalvin Cook, because he's going away from his bread and butter run game, that outside zone scheme that was just perfect fit for his skill set. And like you mentioned, Adam, there's going to be less red zone opportunities there. I know he's supposed to get an uptick in receiving volume. But we didn't necessarily see that play out with, again, Shane Waldron in Seattle when he came over there. I feel like that always is a little more amped up in the preseason around this time, and it's not always definitely something that translates. So I guess that's where my concern lays more. I see a lot of people pumping up Dalvin Cook because of the potential receiving volume upside, but I think he's going to be hurt based on what you said in the red zone and then overall in that run game.
So a couple things. One, I really can't comment on how a guy fits into scheme, and that's honestly one of the reasons why I like having you on the show. Different analysts at CBS focus on different things. Dan's really good at those types of breakdowns. So I can't comment. I can say, though, that I was a little worried about Justin Herbert last year, because if you looked at the end of Justin Herbert's rookie season, 2020, wasn't playing as well. And if you looked at his air yards per pass attempt, they were going down, and he wasn't throwing the ball downfield as much. And they bring in this new offensive coordinator who came from the Saints and had 1 year as the coordinator of the Lions and Lombardi. And he had a terrible year with Matthew Stafford because he tried to change Matthew Stafford and he tried to make him like Saintsy. And I was really worried about Justin Herbert in that regard. He's got in his rookie season, didn't do as well when he was throwing short. Coordinator's got this track record. This doesn't look, I wouldn't say I was really worried. That's actually not the truth, but I was a little bit worried about that, and it ended up not mattering. So I can't really feel comfortable getting into the whole zone versus man, that kind of stuff. I like Dalvin Cook as the lead guy in this offense. One thing we don't know, though, is no matter how good Alexander Mattison was, they would not use 2 backs. Would this coaching staff be more willing to make it a 70-30 split on a more regular basis, or 65-35, something like that? No idea.
And we've seen that coaching tree use multiple backs in the past. So that's a big concern there too.
Also not use multiple backs in the past, right?
When they have a guy they've used, Gurley's clearly the best example of it. When Gurley was at his best, he was the best in football.
And Darrell Henderson was a feature back, I'd say. Like Sony Michel did not do that much before the Henderson injury.
Well, and Cam Akers was when he came back too. But
sure.
we're focusing more so on McVay, and so it's always different when you get disciples, as Dan said, So Shane Waldron, again, it's hard to say a guy going to an established head coach, a defensive-minded head coach, and Pete Carroll, who's going to win those battles again, conservative versus not conservative.
All right, so let's take a break. When we come back, lessons learned from a 2021 fantasy draft from Bill Winson after this on Fantasy Football Today. All right, here we go. Lessons learned from last year's Fantasy Football Today draft. It was a 12-team, 3 wide receiver, full PPR league with a flex. So 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 3 receivers, tight end, flex, kicker, DST. And as Jamie mentioned, it was one of the last drafts we did. So you're not going to see any J.K. Dobbins in there.
I believe we did it Monday before the opener.
Okay. And I love it. I love that draft. We've done so many at that point, but this one's like, all the guys we work with, everybody who has the same sleepers, breakouts, and busts, everyone's tendencies and who they're going to draft. Whatever. But I do love this.
Wow. Make me feel worse about not being invited, Adam.
Yeah. Basically all the A-list. Yeah. So, Dan, did you have any other lessons? I know you had a few that you wanted to talk about. Anything else you want to discuss from that draft?
So a couple other things I was thinking about looking at this draft. I think this is going to happen every year now, just based on the scarcity of the position and how we're always just so desperate to find some points there at tight end. There's going to be one guy that gets pushed up boards And you'll see it really at its peak at the end of the draft season, like right in this style, this range of draft right before the season. That player last year was TJ Hawkinson, a player who really didn't have a track record of too much dynamicism from an athleticism standpoint. He didn't have a track record of too much of a receiving option, even dating back to Iowa. He was an okay receiver. He's kind of a two-way tight end. And I worry that this year, I don't want to compare the two, but I worry that there's already an emerging player this year in that mold, and that would be Dalton Schultz, a player who I'm not going to be drafting much of, I don't think, because I think there's a lot of an assumption that with Cooper gone, Schultz is going to take those vacated targets. But if you really look how that Kellen Moore offense works, and ever since they moved away from Jason Garrett there in Dallas, it hasn't really operated through the tight end very often, and they're replacing talent at the wide receiver position. It's not like they went and drafted a receiver this year who they're really high on in Jalen Tolbert, who a lot of people really like as well, and thought if he played at a bigger school, he would have been an earlier draft pick. And they're bringing back talent at receiver too. Obviously, the thought right now is that Michael Gallup is doing well in his recovery, and he'll be back sooner than expected. So I'm just worried about pushing up tight ends just to get a tight end. If you look at this draft, some of those tight ends that got pushed up at the end, TJ Hawkinson's the best example, but then you have like Noah Fant and all these guys who you're taking in a range where you could be taking swings at wide receiver. You could be taking swings at the AJ Dillons of the world. And so ultimately Logan Thomas went in this range. Go ahead.
What
round are we talking about here? Because
it starts with Hawkinson, because he was always the one who went above the rest. And Hawkinson goes off the board in round 5. And then you start to see the Fants and the Logan Thomases in rounds 6 and 7.
Okay. Because I love Dalton Schultz right now. He's one of my favorite draft guys. He's going in round 7. And I will say this about Hawkinson. He was on pace for 119 targets. So I don't really have a ton of regrets. It's obvious to me that he's not quite, in your opinion, in my opinion, not quite good enough. And you knew it last year. I think I realized it this year. Not quite good enough to be a star. But if he was on pace for 119 targets, I think he would have at least returned 7th round value, maybe 5th round. And I don't know about Schultz in the 5th round, but Schultz in the 7th round to me is great value. Because we do have a little bit of a track record with him. I mean, he was really good last year, and he was good the year before when he got the opportunity. And you could say they're replacing Amari Cooper, but Jalen Tolbert is not replacing Amari. You know what I mean? Like he's not replacing Amari Cooper. So I think you're right about round 5, but I think if Dalton Schultz keeps going in round 7, I'm all over that.
And I'm not so sure it will be Schultz, but there will be a tight end who will be moving up into that round 5 range by the time this is all said and done, I think.
It could be Goddard. It could be Hawkinson again. I don't know if there's anybody else in that range, just because it's a clear top 5 barring injury right now.
Gronk. How about Gronk?
It could be Gronk. It certainly could be. Probably more so in non and half PPR than full PPR. I think the thing about Hawkinson, which I was as guilty of this as anybody, was just looking at the lack of targets and the lack of players essentially for Detroit, and hoping that he would take that next step forward. Like Dan said, there wasn't a huge track record of sustained success, but you could certainly see a path to success, which is the same reason why I like the Mon-Fri Brown, which eventually materialized at the end of the season. I think in terms of Schultz, first off, Adam, you missed the news on this morning that he is staying away from the team despite signing his franchise tag. So he's upset about the contract following the David Njoku deal. So that's something we got to keep an eye on. Also, you missed the biggest news over the weekend is that the greatest quarterback ever retired. And so I think just looking at Schultz, for example, yes, the Kellen Moore offense probably is not going to feature him, but I think that goes back to the quarterback, though. The quarterback is going to feature him. Dak Prescott is very much, I think, in love with Dalton Schultz. And I think that had to do with the reason they allowed the Amari Cooper trade to happen. Finance is clearly a big part of it, but they felt keeping Schultz was a little bit more of a priority.
Hey, wait, are you talking about Ryan Fitzpatrick, by the way?
Of course.
I talked about that on sorry, little cameo there from my son. I talked about that on Friday, so we did it
on Thursday.
Maybe Friday morning, but whatever it was, yeah. We did a whole 30-minute bonus podcast on Fitzpatrick, Jamie. I'm sorry. All right, so Dan, that's a good lesson to be learned there. Don't reach for that tight end. Jamie, I just want to get this one out of the way real quick. I don't think we need to harp on it, but we're going to keep bringing it up, I'm sure. There were some preseason things that led to some overreactions and led to DeAndre Swift being drafted in the 4th round, Jamar Chase going maybe in the 8th round. Jamar Chase was dropping the ball. DeAndre Swift had an injury. Jonathan Taylor dropped a little bit because Carson Wentz got hurt and Quentin Nelson got hurt. So I think we're going to try to take advantage of these overreactions to preseason injuries. That's a big one for me.
I mean, we talked about these though when they were happening. You know, it was you're going to get these players at a value, and you just have to understand. You know, it's obviously case by case. Taylor was the one that stood out the most though, because you knew at some point Wentz and Nelson would be back, and so at what point they're back, you feel pretty good about the situation for mostly for Nelson, but you feel pretty good about the situation for Taylor, knowing that he's going to have the guys around him, and so it was first the instant overreaction of, oh my God, don't take him until round 2. And then it was, he should be a 1st round pick. It doesn't matter where you take him in the 1st round. The other 2 were just silly mistakes on people that panicked.
How about the teams that started RB? So Dave had the 2nd pick, and he went Dalvin Cook, David Montgomery, and then Justin Jefferson in round 3. And then he took Deontay Johnson in round 4. So not bad picks. He made the playoffs. He got the 5 seed. I started RB. I did not make the playoffs. I had Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, Robert Woods, and Gus Edwards as my first 4 picks. RJ at pick 9. I had the 8th pick, by the way. Derrick Henry fell to me, and I didn't anticipate having him, but I did. And then I was like, all right, let's take Barkley. It'll be fun. It wasn't fun. RJ at pick 9. He took Aaron Jones and Joe Mixon. It's a really good start. He missed the playoffs. He had Patrick Mahomes in round 3, Myles Gaskin in round 4. Not really sure there are any takeaways there, but 3 teams did go RB, and the highest finish was 5th.
Well, RJ's a good one because his first receiver was who?
I don't know. Let's take
He went Mahomes round 3, Gaskin round 4, Hawkinson round 5. So this is
Claypool
round 6.
Man, that's and then
Jacoby Myers round 7.
I'll tell you, lesson. I don't think any of us would ever wait that long to take a wide receiver in this format. 3 receiver PPR, round 6. Ugh. Yeah. Right?
Yeah, if he had gone, let's say he takes Mahomes in round 3, because that's the range he was going. If he took Myles Gaskin over Cooper Kupp, God, you want to look back and punch yourself.
And I took Robert Woods over Cooper Kupp, and I loved that pick. I was so excited about it. Obviously, one of the things you learn when you look back at a draft is that just a lot of things you can't predict, right? It makes things fun. I got a lot more lessons here to talk about, but Jamie, anything you want to bring up? I haven't really gotten to you.
I mean, it's a lot of the same things we've been talking about. It's a matter of don't panic with some of the preseason stuff. Like Dan said, as I said before, you want to attach yourself to good offenses. It's always a good thing when you're looking at some of these players late. I think RJ just proved another thing that I will always avoid. We talk about this a lot, and we might see a little bit more, I think, with people that go tight end early and then still want to take quarterback. If you take a quarterback and a tight end early in the first 5, take a quarterback and a tight end in the first 5 rounds, you better make sure you're hitting on your other positions.
Yeah, and there really, if you look at it a bit closer, there really wasn't any value. It was almost the opposite for all these teams that went early at quarterback. It started off with Mahomes that went by back-to-back with Josh Allen. Good job on Josh Allen. George definitely got value on that. But really looking past that, Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray, Dak Prescott, Russell Wilson coming up, I believe, all in round 5. I mean, those are all regrettable picks that you're giving up the chance at a T. Higgins, for example, there, or an Adam Thielen, or whoever it may be, a receiver or a running back potentially, but most likely a receiver. I mean, Jamar Chase went 7 picks later after these quarterbacks. What did you gain from them? I don't think any of those quarterbacks really outproduced some of these guys that hit late, like Jalen Hurts. The next 2 after that, which were 3 rounds later, were Jalen Hurts, or 2 rounds later, Jalen Hurts and Justin Herbert. So I'm just not so sure in these 1 QB leagues there's just any value to taking these quarterbacks in them after the big guys, in that round 5 range.
It's so much fun to look back and go, Justin Herbert round 8.
Yeah. How about what happened here with Jerry Jeudy going ahead of T. Higgins in round 5?
There was a lot of Jeudy hype last year around this time.
It was Dave, but there was a lot of Jerry Jeudy hype,
especially on FFT. Dave was as big as Jeudy fan you'll find.
Yeah, and it's always interesting when Dave does this because then he goes the complete opposite direction whenever he gets burned by a guy. So he's very anti-Jerry.
So now he won't draft him at all.
I mean, look, and this is kind of, I think, what we were mentioning in terms of TJ Hawkinson, what Dan's point was about not a proven track record. Sometimes when you look at these players and, you can attach it to Amon-Ra St. Brown this year. You could attach it to, Elijah Moore to an extent this year. You can attach it to, if you want to even somebody like Hunter Renfrow, who you could see, who's been in the league a few years, but you could see, the spike and why the spike happened and now why there could be some potential downfall. So, you see the path to greatness for Jerry Jeudy even last year, and this isn't a knock on Dave taking him at this point last year. He was a little overexcited about Jerry Jeudy, but you can see why. But it's also going back to, okay, where's the scenario? Is there a good quarterback in play there? And you want to talk about maybe DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett this season, where those guys are with their quarterbacks. Look at who's getting these guys the ball. We could say target volume is going to be big. It's a potential reason to, get a little concerned about somebody like Deontay Johnson, for example, somebody like that. So, attaching your receivers, especially early round picks, to guys that don't have good quarterbacks or don't have proven track records, unless you're pretty confident there's a breakout coming, these are the pitfalls.
Is there a lesson to be learned from James Conner and Leonard Fournette? Conner went in round 9 in this draft. Chase Edmonds went in round 5. Leonard Fournette went in round 11, and Ronald Jones went in round 8. So both these guys were drafted significantly after the other backfield mate, and they both finished as top 10 running backs. They had tremendous years. Injuries definitely played a role for Conner because he wouldn't have had that tremendous of it. He would have been good, but not amazing if Edmonds didn't miss basically 6 games. And then Fournette just won the job and just kept the job, and Giovanni Bernard didn't matter. And it was really weird. I'm hesitant to say there's a lesson here, and that,
spin it forward. Spin it forward.
Yeah, right.
So you have like the first scenario that comes to mind for me is Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon.
Exactly.
We are over the moon about Javonte Williams, and understandably so if he gets the lead role. He's going to be a superstar. We saw it in that Chiefs game when he was involved in the passing game. You could see this offense getting significantly better with Russell Wilson. You certainly could see what he can do on the ground and the upside there. But it's a big but. It's a guy that's been proven, that's not necessarily done yet in Melvin Gordon, that they brought back for a reason. And so I keep closing the gap on those two. I'm certainly taking Javonte Williams first. Most likely I'm not getting Javonte Williams because the more and more I look at it and where you have to take him, he's falling out of that range for me. But it's not just necessarily that team. It's Seattle potentially, Ken Walker and Rashad Penny. It's the Jets, Breece Hall and Michael Carter. It's it might be Arizona, the reverse, with Darrell Williams and James Conner. It might be Tampa Bay again,
What's the lesson though? I mean, is it target running backs on good offenses? This was just an injury situation? Like what? I don't even know how to.
Well, I think the lesson would be is that if you like a backfield and you like to get a piece of that backfield, and it's just a matter of cost. And so, like, I love Aaron Jones' setup. I mean, I mentioned it with the bold predictions. He could lead the team in receptions this year. But there's that other guy that's a pretty good running back too. And you could get him probably 3 or 4 rounds later. And, if you want a piece of the Kansas City backfield, Dan mentioned, we fell victim once again last year to Clyde Edwards-Helaire. They brought in a guy that has a track record when healthy on a very good offense now. Might be the best opportunity he's ever had in Ronald Jones. Get him later. Get Melvin Gordon later. I'm going to draft a lot of Alexander Madison. I love the Vikings offense. And that's going to be somebody that I look at. So, it's a matter of if you like backfields, you like offenses, you don't want to pay the cost of what the starter is going to have to, cost you. Take that other guy a little bit later and just hope for the best.
So for me, it's a focus on like what do these backs have in common, Conner and Fournette? And to me, the number one thing they had in common was they were on a high-scoring offense. The number two thing they had in common, they were on an offense that actually was willing to run the ball a decent amount in the red zone to give them opportunities, specifically in Conner's case. But, a lot of Fournette's value in the end of the year came from some increased passing game work. But if you can find a back, and it's going to be tougher this year. Like I was looking through the guys this year. You mentioned some guys in the email, and I was thinking, like, who fits this mold, right? Like on a really good offense and has a really good chance to be the pure red zone guy. Because if you look at it, like Edmonds the year before, it was a little bit unpredictable because Edmonds actually was pretty efficient in the red zone the year before in 2020 and was used a decent amount there too. So it's a little bit hard to predict that, but you had the track record with Conner being used in kind of a 3-down role in Pittsburgh as well as in the passing game. So if you can find these backs that are on really good offenses being drafted second in their backfield and have a good chance to have that red zone role, I think those are the guys you want to target in these later rounds because they have so much more scoring upside than even the volume guys that go early, like the Mike Davises of the world and the Myles Gaskins on these bad teams. Yeah, they have a path to volume. They're projected to have all this volume, but the volume can change really fast. But the actual offense, I feel like, are easier to predict before the year than than maybe the volume.
I do want to say I was pretty much out on Myles Gaskin last year, but I don't think it's crazy that people were in on him, because if you go back to 2020, Myles Gaskin was very good for fantasy. He really was. I mean, we keep crapping all over him, but he was great. And Mike Davis was too for a while. I was totally out on him because I think a lot of people kind of read the tea leaves there. Guy was getting old. He had finished really poorly. Atlanta didn't look great, but whatever. But yeah, I'm not sure what the lesson is for Myles Gaskin. I
in
think
both cases of Gaskin and Davis, though, Adam, they were both guys that in some ways didn't have the draft capital, didn't have the track record, came out of nowhere and had a small sample size of production.
Yep, that's absolutely right. And they didn't exactly tear it up.
Both Fournette and Connor had a little opposite, on not only those big seasons with Pittsburgh, but had decent draft capital. And Fournette had really good draft capital and really good early career with Jacksonville. Until
let's also not forget though the situations. I mean, there's a reason why Fournette was going behind Jones, because everything coming out of Tampa Bay was Jones was going to be their leading rusher,
right?
Or give the opportunity to be their leading rusher. Giovanni Bernard was brought in, and we know what that was to Tom Brady in terms of that type of player. And Fournette was going to kind of be the swing guy. And it turned out that Fournette was just the best player for both roles, and it worked out. Connor he's going to supplement or complement Chase Edmonds, and Edmonds didn't get the touchdowns, and then Edmonds got hurt, and Connor was a superstar. And I just want to go back to what I said before. The flip side of that is, when you want to get those pieces of those backfields, don't overlook the stars, going in, the top tier guys. But again, it's just a matter of what you want to spend, and so how Dan was saying, taking some of these, premier receivers, if you're going to go that route, that's when you start to take swings at defenses at those other positions. And that's when you start to take those running backs.
I'm looking at Brinson's team, Bill Winston's team. So his final roster was pretty close to, let's see. I just want to see what he drafted. You know who he played in the finals by any chance? Because if he played George, that would be a cool twist. No, he played Marone. Anyway, his final roster was Aaron Rodgers, drafted, Najee Harris, his second-round pick, Cooper Kupp, CeeDee Lamb, Devontae Adams, Deebo Samuel, drafted all of them. His RB2 was Devin Singletary, who was drafted by George, and George ended up being the 2 seed. So I thought it would have been a little cruel if George had drafted Devin Singletary and then lost to Devin Singletary in the finals. And then Dawson Knox was his tight end in the championship game. So that's really impressive.
One of the funny stories about this league was, I believe Will only lost one game. Let me double check that.
Almost positive on that. Yeah.
And he lost to Pete Prisco, who is terrible at fantasy. And in the week that he lost to Pete, he was losing at some part of the day Sunday, but Will's team was just a juggernaut. And so Pete would various times during the season not change his lineup to put in guys that were even, if a guy was questionable, he wasn't really bothering because he was out of it. This was toward the middle of the end of the season. So we were sitting there on Sunday and we said, I think Pete, as a matter of fact, had Jalen Hurts. And I think it was a Hurts, whoever his quarterback was. So we put in Hurts, who had a good 1:00 game. And we just messed with his lineup a little bit to see if Will would notice. We were going to change it back. It was not going to be anything that we were going to do to have it happen. But Pete's actual lineup ended up winning. Will was like, you screwed with my team, my perfect season. He was saying that I didn't want to be in a league that somebody had a perfect season. He was going crazy.
Will went 15-1. Pete went 3-11.
That all sounds right up Will Brinson's alley. So I don't deny. I believe all that story, Jamie.
Yeah.
All right. So don't push up tight ends who aren't worthy of a 5th round pick. Don't overreact to preseason news. Don't wait until round 6 to draft a wide receiver in a 3-receiver PPR league. Don't get too hyped up taking a guy like Jerry Jeudy over T. Higgins, especially when the quarterback situation is so different. Try to attach yourself to, backfields. If you want a piece of a backfield, maybe it's smarter to take the guy who goes later. And the running back dead zone, Dan's not a fan. Jamie and I are kind of okay with it based on
Well,
last.
I mean, it's a good one to revisit real quick, and just in terms of who are the guys that are going to go then, for this year, and I think it's some of the similar names: Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Miles Sanders. I think you see Ezekiel Elliott's in there. Barkley might be the start of it. Who?
Want some ADP?
Sure.
All right. Starting in round 4, 38th overall. This is ADP
NFC?
on NFC since May 1st. Breece Hall, Antonio Gibson, David Montgomery, Ezekiel Elliott, Josh Jacobs, J.K. Dobbins, Travis Etienne, Elijah Mitchell, and then all the way down to 70th overall, a gap of like 16 picks. A.J. Dillon. And then, Ken Walker, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, they're in round 7. A lot of names I wouldn't mind on my team, honestly.
A lot of names I don't want on my team over receivers.
Who are the ones you don't want, Dan?
All right, let's do it again. I don't want Breece Hall. I think that's a volume-based projection there, so I definitely don't want Breece Hall in that offense. And what was next after Breece Hall? Gibson definitely do not want. That's an easy avoid for me. Keep going.
David Montgomery.
Montgomery has been proven to have success without a good offense, but it's just not I'd rather a receiver there too, so I'm probably not taking David Montgomery.
Ezekiel Elliott.
Zeke is the one I can get on board with because I see a path there. If he was playing injured last year, and that's a good offense. So I'm good with Zeke. Go ahead.
Josh Jacobs.
Hell no in that new offense.
J.K. Dobbins.
I don't even believe I see it because we have the points in front of him. You sent the CSV, Adam, but I don't believe that Josh Jacobs scored this many points last year. I just don't. I think this is like a typo. Or
he's another one where he's
compiling points. Like, do you ever want him in your lineup?
He caught all those passes when Drake and Waller were hurt.
Right.
But he should score more because the offense should be significantly better.
You assume if he's going to have that role, but they didn't pick up his option. They drafted another running back.
Shall we keep going? J.K. Dobbins.
Dobbins I can get excited about. Go ahead. I like
Travis Etienne.
Not in on Etienne.
Elijah Mitchell.
Definitely not in on Elijah Mitchell.
And then all the way at pick 70. Like once you get to pick 70, I mean, I think you've got some leeway here. Dylan,
I like
Walker.
the guys who have the good offenses and the talent. I just don't like the guys who are being pushed up based on volume, projected volume, because we know that changes so frequently.
Yeah. All right. Well, but Breece Hall has got the talent. I'm a little surprised.
Breece Hall has the talent. He doesn't have the offense, though.
Breece Hall. It's probably not. All right, guys. Thank you very much. Not ready to commit to the Jets yet. No.
No.
Hey, thanks to Dan Shark. Thanks for coming on, Dan.
Thanks for having me. It was fun to be back on.
Love your headphones, by the way. Great.
Yeah, there will be improvements with the headphones from this point on. This will be the last time this happens. Promise.
All right. For JB and Dan, I'm Adam. We'll talk to you tomorrow when we talk about year 2 and year 3 wide receivers. Great values historically. So these are some players that might be able to win you a league. We'll talk to you then on Fantasy Football Today.